Greg Ligon here with Leadership Network and one of our conversation blogs. And today I have the opportunity to speak with Doug Schmidt, who's a senior pastor at Woodside Bible Church in the Detroit, Michigan area. And thrilled to have the opportunity to talk with him. Woodside's been a part of several of our programs through the years. Great team. And Doug, thanks so much for agreeing to join us today. Love to have you do a little bit more introduction of yourself and tell us a little bit of the history background of Woodside Bible Church.
Well, it's great to be with you, Greg. I've been at Woodside now for almost 23 years. It's a conservative church, about 60 years of age. Conservative, but when I came, it was kind of stuck in the past a bit. And so the church has been a wonderful opportunity to grow, to adjust. It's about 60 years of age. We went through a name change. We went through relocation. When we relocated a few years ago, we moved on to a new campus. We were at that time about maybe 2,000 people and one campus. And so in the last 7 years, we've gone from one campus to just opening our 10th campus now. And the Lord's added a few more thousand people. So it's a church that it's wonderful to be a part of. It's a risk-taking church. It's a church that's really committed to be on mission to reach its community and its area for the Lord. So great to be a part of it and great to be a part of this interview and conversation.
You bet. You guys are doing some exciting work. You mentioned that you have 10 campuses, and I know a number of those have come through mergers. And I think, whenever people ask me about mergers, I always point to the way you guys do it. It seems like you do a really great job of honoring the history of the congregation, but really have a very great process for incorporating those campuses into your church. Anything that you'd like to kind of give a little bit of insight into how that works and why that works so well for you?
I wish I could tell you we had a great strategy and it all developed and according to plan. But it all started really in our first elder meeting when we relocated, before we even had our first public service in our new location. I mentioned to our elders in my office, I said, this campus isn't big enough for us to accomplish our mission statement. And they kind of looked at me a little weird, but what I was so afraid of is that our church and its leadership would get settled into the new digs and look at this as the destination instead of just a milestone on the journey. And so they asked me to clarify, and I said, even if we had 10 or 15,000 people at this campus, we've not accomplished our mission statement of reaching this tri-county area with the gospel of Christ. And so they said, well, what do you have in mind? At that time, we had people coming from 111 different zip codes. Even some from across the river in Canada. And so I told them, I said, we have to, and I forget, Greg, at that time, what words I used, whether it was daughter works or campuses or satellites. It's all kind of evolved over the years. But I said, I think we have to develop campuses or satellites or daughter works to take the gospel to these areas, particularly for the purpose of evangelism. It's hard to invite somebody to come to church with you when it's 45 minutes away. And so I said, but I've got this idea that I've been thinking about for years, and that is we could take $250,000 or $300,000 and unload semis in a middle school for 6 or 7 years while we save up enough money to buy land. When right down the street from that middle school is a church building whose parking lot is maybe almost empty on a Sunday morning. I thought there has to be some way where we can bring kingdom resources together for better stewardship. And I said that, because in that church and in the middle school, the theology, if it's not the same, it's very similar. There has to be a way of doing it. And to keep churches alive, so many churches have died. I read recently that 3,500 to 4,500 churches die every year. You may have more recent statistics than I, but when that happens, a lighthouse closes in a community, and that church building becomes a Montessori school, or a cult moves in, and the resources from that go somewhere out of state or out of the country to do good things in church planting and evangelism. but resources are drained from a region. And so I said, there's got to be a way of doing this, but I've never seen it happen. And so I asked him to pray with me about it, and we began to pray. And 5 months later, a church whose a pastor I'd known for many years had gone up for sale. They'd been in a multi-year decline. And I asked if he was open to a new idea. And we began to talk, and the churches began to have discussions. And what it ended up being was one church, two locations. And we went through a dating time period and answered the same questions multiple times and got to know each other. And so now, 10 campuses later, we look back and mergers they're not our strategy. Campuses are our strategy. But mergers are just a way that God has done it. And you're right, we try to do it in a way that honors the people. Normally, and when we first started this, it was a healthy church, a larger healthy church merging with a smaller unhealthy church. And the dynamics are so much different there, because often the leadership, the visionary people, had already gone. And so you're working with people who were entrenched to the history and the heritage, and you had to work through all of that. My predecessor said it well. He said, when a church is ready and they see that their future can be greater than their memories, then they're ready to let go. Merger is not a good word because it connotes to some that a little bit of us and a little bit of you. And we have to find kind ways of saying, no, we already know it doesn't work. And then when they're ready to merge, we merge. But then our strategy is not to come in and save the day. That would just pour on more pain to the people who have come so close to the death experience. And what we try to do is come in and resource the people that are there, especially the leaders that are there, to lead successful ministries and to turn a church around. So it's worked really well for us. I mean, we've learned a lot along the way and from our own mistakes.
That's great. I love the phrase, when a church is ready when they can see that there's the opportunity for their future to be greater than their past. And it's kind of fun. That's a nice lead in to one of the things I wanted to talk with you about today as well. And you guys are a part of our What's Next leadership community, and it's for churches who are kind of exploring what the next chapter in their story is. And so it just seems very appropriate. You know, you mentioned even when you got to your relocated for the first time, you said, hey, we want to make sure that we don't see this as our destination, but just one of the stops along the way. And so would love to have you share maybe one or two of the ideas that you guys are working on currently. They're kind of some of the next stops along the way, if you would. And I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
What's interesting, because we always want to be ready to do whatever God wants us to do. I wish I could tell you we had a 5-year plan. We really don't. I've been encouraged to read more recently that a lot of businesses don't have 5-year plans anymore because the culture and the business culture is changing so rapidly. So we always want to be in a position to say yes to those opportunities. So that involves resources and financing. And for us, it really involved having our structures and our systems in place so that we could say yes when God tapped us on the shoulder with a new opportunity. So one of the things that has come out of the next steps for us is to do some reorganization, to get the right people in place, to get the right systems in place. And we're probably 80%, 85% of the way there for that. We're also, we've launched into some new territory. And one of the things, as I said, prior to just recently, it was a healthy church merging with an unhealthy church. Our last merger was with a very healthy church of about 300. But they came to the conclusion that that death wasn't the driving force or averting death, it was success. And they thought, if we can merge with a church like Woodside, we can reach our community in a more efficient and a faster way. The direction we've taken as well is we've moved into some harder areas for campusing, Midtown Detroit, as well as Pontiac. And this is all new territory for us that demanded that we learn. And so we've been on a learning curve, wanting to learn before we do and wanting to listen. And we've done that. We're about ready to launch officially the Pontiac campus, which is in one of the most devastated cities in the country. But in conjunction with that campus, we're also launching a dream center to go along with it. And if God so blesses this dream center, it could be the beginning of a family of dream centers that could help us not only here in the Detroit area, but around the state to develop a concept and really a vehicle that could sustain urban ministry.
Say a little bit more about, in terms of what are some of the uniquenesses of moving into some of those, what are some of the learnings that you've discovered as you've tried to move into some of these very different kind of environments?
We've learned, as I said, all of our campuses prior to these last two were kind of the same. They were in suburban areas, we all looked the same, talked the same, there's some social economic differences. But these areas that we're moving into are in many cases just devastated. The multiculturalism is there, so we're learning different ways of doing worship, different ways of handling people, even different words to use. Finding that some of the words that have just different meanings in different cultures, and some of those words can be misunderstood and some even offensive. So we've been on a learning track. We've hired some good people that can lead us into that learning pattern.
That's good. You know, these campuses, as you said, will be very different. How do you anticipate that you'll measure progress in those and impact?
Well, it's interesting because in both of these inner city campuses, we've determined that it's going to be a long time, and maybe never, that they'll be self-sustaining. And so we're understanding that, and we're in this for the long haul, that we are one church, many locations. And that's also helped us to understand that these become great service opportunities for other campuses. So we'll measure the progress based on some discipleship goals. We'll measure the progress based on even outsiders and their willingness to buy in, foundations and so forth. We'll measure the progress in terms of even the development of some of our leaders, and community impact is a little harder to measure, but we'll be able to do it. And that's the real goal, is that campus making an impact in the community? Is the community a better place? Is it being used for after-school education, for feeding programs, for recreational programs for different ages within that community?
Good. I know senior leaders like you dream a lot. Anything that is kind of a big idea that is kind of out there that you're just kind of let simmer, but you kind of hope that something's going to be happening with that?
There are a couple things, if you don't tell anyone. I can share with you.
Nobody will know except the thousands that will see this blog post.
Okay. I think the Dream Center idea is a good one, and I think that could really develop from a mustard seed into something pretty special. I think as well, God has kind of placed a dream in my heart. I have a huge passion for pastors and trying to help pastors. And we've looked at Woodside, and we look at some of the resources we have to offer. And I would love to be in our region, a regional resource to encourage pastors, particularly ones that don't have the opportunity to go to conferences, smaller churches whose pastor may not have anyone to talk to or to share ideas with, or even to get encouragement to stay with it and then not quit ministry. So we're kind of just letting that idea brew a little bit. We're sharing it with some of our senior leadership. God has given us a good posture of influence in our area here, and I think that could be one of the things that could develop organically and even organizationally in the future to be something significant. If we do something, we'll test it and start small. and see what God does.
Well, that's exciting. I know that will be a great blessing to the region and to the church. So that's exciting.
I hope so.
We'll look forward to seeing what happens with that. I want to switch gears a little bit now. Tell me maybe a couple of resources. Is there a couple of books on your nightstand that you're reading that are having an impact in your ministry and life? Anything that you would recommend?
You know, some of the books I've read recently, Center Church by Tim Keller has been a good book. A good book to reinforce ideas and philosophy and direction. That's been a wonderful book. A little book, a real easy read by Fred Lee, and it's entitled "If Disney Ran Your Hospital." And it's a great story about a man who was a hospital executive that also did a stint at Disney, and talked about really some important concepts about how too often we're concerned about competency, and that we want to be competent in all of our different areas, whether it's guest services or family ministries and all. And as a church overall, we want to be competent. But competent is just the lowest level of expectation of, if you want to use the word consumers today in a hospital situation. Unfortunately, we have them in church too. But he challenged me to take it beyond competency to courtesy, and how courtesy can make a difference, and yet the courtesy will not buy loyalty. And then he talked beyond that of going to compassion and creating compassion stories for the people who come into our building. One of our young men illustrated that well. He's was a waiter at Capitol Grill, a high-end restaurant, and he had somebody coming in who's a regular customer, but they hated the I think cappuccino or something like that at Capitol Grill. So when he knew he was coming in, he ran down to the other end of the mall and got him a cappuccino or whatever it was from Starbucks and brought it back, and made a compassion story. And those are the things that develop loyalty. So that it's a real quick read. So you can read it in one sitting. But I thought it was very, very powerful and helped me as a leader to try to take this church to another level. I just finished reading, actually on an airplane ride back from a Leadership Network in Dallas, the book Unfinished by Richard Stearns. And again, was a challenging book in terms of changing culture, the poor, and how we can minister effectively today. Building a Discipleship Culture by Mike Breen, or Developing a Discipleship Culture. A good book and a fresh way of saying old things.
That's good. Those are great. I'm looking forward to the Fred Lee book. I'll grab that when I get off the call here. That sounds like a great one as well. Questions that I haven't asked that I should have? Anything you were dying to tell me about, dying for us to talk about that I failed to ask?
You know, I think one of the things, we're watching our culture change so rapidly. And I think this is what I'm thinking about today, Greg, and that is this world is changing so rapidly, and I think it's easy for church leaders to get discouraged or to work within their cocoon. When this is the opportunity that we have as a church to be a strong, loving, tactful voice in our world, in our community, in our culture, I think more than ever we have to lead with good deeds and follow with the good news. But I think if you ask me what's on my mind and what I'm passionate about today and yesterday and tomorrow, and that is this is kind of our time to make a difference as a church, and we have to be strategic, we have to be insightful, we have to be learners of our culture, and maybe more than ever before, we have to be on our knees and just asking God for the direction, for power, and for Him, as Moses wrote in Psalm 90, to bless the work of our hands.
Thank you. That's a great word of exhortation and encouragement and challenge. And you guys are living that well. Thank you for the way you're leading the church and for the great team that you have. You guys are on the front lines, making it work, and it's been fun to be able to walk alongside and see God bless that as well. Thanks again for being with me today, and thank you for joining us for this conversation, Leadership Network conversation with Doug Schmidt from Woodside Bible Church. Have a great day.
Thank you, Greg.